Summer is usually a time when we see a big lull in releases. Last year, the only AAA releases around the months of July through August were Pillars of Eternity, which I didn't play, and Wolfenstein Youngblood, which I did play but didn't review because it was so bad that I didn't feel it was worth the time. So I guess now is as good a time as ever. Wolfenstein Youngblood is a game so horrible it is unrecognizable when compared to its predecessors. It's a game so appallingly boring that you wouldn't think it came from the same developers as New Order. A game which takes the act of killing Nazi robots with dual-wielded machine guns and makes a chore of it. This shit dish is also served with a heaping side of annoying tomboyish dialogue. The game is a thick black skid mark on the underpants of an otherwise perfectly enjoyable reboot franchise. It's disgraceful. 2.5 out of 10 because the visuals are fine. So after last year's awful performance, we can only have a better summer this year, right? Perhaps being virtually unemployed has allowed more freedom and time to play more games, but yeah, this year seems better, even if the games we're getting aren't of AAA status, except maybe Ghost of Tsushima, but I don't have a piss station, so. The closest we've gotten so far is the latest entry in the Paper Mario series, which I would consider AA at best, but what do I know? Prior to the release of Party Mario and the Origami Okami, I haven't played any of the titles except for Super Paper Mario for Wii. I don't remember finishing it because I was bored of all the dialogue, yet in the same year I got Bowser's Inside Story for DS and I played it all the way through, so maybe Super Paper Mario just wasn't the game for 8-year-old math. Flash forward to today. I have played through the latest installment, my understanding of the dialogue increased 1,000-fold, Rimshot, and also through parts of the Thousand Year Door using an emulator, having understood the GameCube release to be the best of them all. To my knowledge, the last few games for handhelds were not generally well received outside of this shiny nugget of dialogue, so with my limited knowledge of Paper Mario, I can say this is definitely the second best I've played. Perhaps my biggest criticism of the game is how wildly inconsistent it can be. The inconsistencies range from combat difficulty to exploration expectations to basically anything related to gameplay. Sometimes the game will hold your hand, walk you to the exit, and refuse to leave until it's certain that you are 100% safe and sound where you are. And other times it will shrug and suggest smacking things with a hammer. Violence is never the answer unless the question is, where is the plot progressing Toad in this room? As you make progress, the enemies get more challenging, but instead of shoving max-up hearts in your face as it does with every other essential element, the hearts, which are the only way to get stronger now that leveling has been removed, are often found by exploring and completing puzzles. While recognizing that this encourages exploration, it's probably important to note that if you were to make it into the late game without finding any of these, the game would be much more difficult without any chance to fix your error. Not necessarily a game-breaking fault, but surely a confusing decision for a game that both children and adults will play. The punishments don't really end with that minor nitpick though. The new combat system, the first dartboard type game, is a bold move from the developers. You shuffle around and line up the enemies so that your turn-based attacks do more damage. It works fine, and I only ever died a handful of times, but good God, what an asshole way to go about puzzles. I have ADHD, and I'm by no means an idiot, but I'm a little slower with processing puzzles because of it. As soon as you slap a timer on something logic-based, it becomes harder to solve due to pressure. Not only that, but if you fail the puzzle, you don't get a second chance to correct yourself, so you just feel like an idiot if you can't solve it. Even more so if you crack at the 2-second mark and spend 1,000 coins so that the toads solve it for you. Now, the story of the game is Mario the princess is gone, do everything. Nothing you haven't seen at least 10 times, but the dialogue was razor-tipped as ever. Once the annoying intro and tutorial segment was over, I found myself legitimately laughing out loud at some of the meta-humor and puns. I was satisfied. The style is the strongest element the game has to offer though. It's delightfully colorful, beautifully lit, and manages to dip down to 20 FPS during big boss battles with cinematics? Why? It's already running at 30 FPS and Odyssey looks twice as good as this and ran at 60, so what gives? I don't understand the optimization issues going on here. Now, having said all of that, all of these problems are relatively minor. There's no one massive issue with Paper Mario and the Origami King besides maybe the combat wheel and my frustrations with it, but that's really a personal issue still. So for those reasons today, I think we can give Paper Mario and the Origami King a 7 out of 10. I enjoyed myself and even shed a small tear when one character did something spoiler related, so I can firmly say it's the most emotion a Mario game has gotten out of me since Mario Kart 8's online mode.
Fuck you, bitch!
You know, come to think of it, I suppose when playing a multiplayer-only game in which skill has about as much to do with the game as the game has to do with real-world progress, frustration is kind of inevitable. Enter Fall Guys. Now, before I even begin to talk about Fall Guys with regards to its functionality, can we talk about the presentation? It's zany, it's wacky, and it's utterly lacking in charm. The Bean characters make minions look like works of art. There's nothing defining about these guys. There's no explanation for why anything is happening or why it's happening. There's no cohesive world. What is there then? There's skins and a cuckoo crazy soundtrack. It could be that I'm beginning to age or something like that, but I cannot for the life of me understand the appeal in this style. The sound design with the constant floating platforms that remind me more of Gmod than a Devolver published title. Turning on Fall Guys for the first time felt like injecting the rainbow car wash soap into my brain. I understand why the game has become popular for streamers and YouTubers to play though. It's the same reason people passing me on the sidewalk chuckle and smile as I desperately try to get my dog to just stand up and walk the half a mile we have left to get home because I'm hungry. It's funny for them, but frustrating as hell for me. The gameplay is nearly non-existent here. For most minigames, you hold W and maybe dive at the right time if you want to spice things up. What makes player interactions interesting, and I say that with hesitance, is a physics system that means the slightest of bumps between players causes you to turn into a dramatic soccer player. Again, fun and silly for watchers, annoying for players. Fall Guys strikes me as a game that is strictly for casual gamers to enjoy. It's sitting neatly next to the likes of Mario Party and Goat Simulator. It's shallow, void of tactics, and any argument for why the gameplay is bad will be met with, well, you don't know how to have fun. I don't intend to return to this game, and I wouldn't recommend you spend your money on it if you enjoy in-depth multiplayer games. The best praise I can give it is that it's stylistically consistent and intuitive, which is really scraping the bottom of the bucket because those are pretty much bare minimum requirements for a game to not trigger a migraine. For those reasons, today, I think we can give Fall Guys a 5 out of 10. The release that did give me a migraine, however, happened to be the one that I enjoyed the most this month. Risk of Rain 2 is the follow-up to the 2013 indie smash hit, a roguelike platformer that had as much depth to combat as it did characters and environments. The sequel has been in early access for over a year, but I wanted to wait for the final product before picking it up and reviewing it formally. If you've seen my Enter the Gungeon review, you know that I adore roguelikes. I think the model is one of the best teachers in all of video game design, always showing and never telling. So color me impressed to see the two-dimensional template being blasted into the third dimension with confidence and some pizzazz too. You still collect items, progress from area to area, and reset completely upon death, but here we have a twist on progression. In Risk of Rain 2, the difficulty doesn't suddenly jump when you progress to the next area, it increases incrementally over time, indicated by a sliding meter on the HUD. This means you could grind the first area for 30 minutes without moving on and find yourself facing insurmountable challenges. Alternatively, you could rush through without grinding or killing many enemies and be horribly under-equipped for the later segments of your run. It's up to the player to strategically find the sweet spot between being well-equipped and spending too much time, though I will admit that sometimes the damn teleporter is just really hard to find. The dreary and almost ugly look of the previous title has been preserved using some interesting art techniques. The environments are composed of dull and drab colors while the enemies are brightly outlined and boast numerous shades of neon to assist the player in survival. I found the style off-putting at first, but as with most roguelikes, it grew on me like mold on food in a school locker. I swear I'll rewrite that later. As of the recording of this video, I have not made it particularly far in the game, though I would say I've seen enough to form an opinion. I've only unlocked 3 of the playable characters and already there is so much diversity in method between them. The Commando is the poster boy and the only character you start with. A simple character with a Dark Souls dodge roll. The Hunter carries a bow with homing arrows that deal high damage at the cost of low health, and this robot is an untouchable beast with a health bar of steel and a devastating nail gun railgun combo. Perhaps the third is the Azazel of this game, but I could care less. It allowed me to get farther than any other character, especially with some bosses having attacks that I still cannot figure out how to evade. I know it's the kind of thing I'll figure out eventually though. Unfortunately, as far as I have seen in my playthroughs, there isn't much in the way of story. Your crew lands on Planet McPlanetface, and to be frank, you just start blasting. There does seem to be some mystery surrounding the final gigantic teleporter, but I have yet to defeat the gelatinous orb boss that appears after activation, so maybe that's where the story is hiding and the whole paragraph was just a waste of time. But overlooking the story, the only other pain the game causes is a little bit of eye strain from the mounds of visual clutter that it so generously dumps into your corneas. The amount of enemies is never too much to handle though. You'll never be at a point where you have to face 100 enemies all charging at once, it's just when the lasers and fireballs and stones are flying, it's easy to be overwhelmed. Nonetheless, the utter chaos kept me glued to my screen, and I foresee it doing so for quite some time. Risk of Rain 2 is not without its flaws, but its ambitions allow it to break free of the typical roguelike mold and bear its own identity with pride. So for those reasons, today, I think we're gonna slap Risk of Rain 2 with an 8 out of 10. Small edit here, I've played Among Us. it's fun. It's a little lacking in the challenge department. The puzzles are insultingly simple, but the visual design reminds me of the good old days, when the internet was the final frontier, and Castle Crashers on Xbox Live Arcade in a friend's basement with pizza was the pinnacle of entertainment. I like it. Well, those are the games I played this summer. Subscribe or something, I don't care.